The Albanese government has become quite adept at cooking the books to make the numbers look better. That's, of course, what they did with the $300 subsidy for power bills. It doesn't actually reduce the price of power at all. It's a payment to power companies so they can knock some money off the bill that they send you, which conveniently means that when inflation is calculated, power bills have gone down, and so inflation will go down. But the actual cost of the commodity hasn't changed. You might call it creative accounting. Well, Deloitte Access Economics has exposed another dodgy way that Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and Treasurer Jim Chalmers, of course, Bronwyn Bishop, who's on this program on a Tuesday, calls him the snake charmer. They're diddling the numbers. It's called off-budget spending, which is where the government spends more money by declaring it as an investment, i.e. that money goes through a government business or lending scheme, which means it isn't included in the underlying budget number, which is the one that we talk about on budget night, surplus and deficit, etc. The Financial Review reported today that based on Deloitte numbers, off-budget spending will go through the roof to $87.1 billion over the next 4 years. Now, take a look at this graph the AFR ran. This shows the off-budget spending for the past couple of decades and what Deloitte projects will be spent in the future. That's the red bit there. As you can see, it wasn't a thing before the NBN came along and for the most part was below $10 billion a year after that. But it will explode to record levels under Albanese and Chalmers. And this shows exactly what that means. The federal budget is actually about $20 billion worse off a year than what Chalmers will tell you on budget night. Very tricky. A large portion of this is student loans, as you can see here, and things like the Clean Energy Finance Corporation, Snowy Hydro, and the Housing Future Fund. Now, the student loan number, of course, has increased because the Albanese government is forgiving $16 billion worth of student debt. So, in effect, the government uses this money, which isn't really counted in the budget, to achieve populist promises to buy off voters, like writing off student debt, and to achieve policy ends like funding renewable energy. And because this money is spent directly on things or putting money in people's hands, it is directly inflationary. And this is exactly what Reserve Bank Governor Michelle Bullock has warned about. High government spending fuels inflation. Economist Chris Richardson told the AFR that discrepancy between the underlying and headline figures had encouraged politicians to hide their trash there. He said it's reached a point where the headline balance is now becoming the figure that deserves more attention than the underlying figure, and that is deliberately why they use the other figure. The Centre for Independent Studies also blew the whistle on this last week in an excellent paper by former Treasury official Gene Tunney. In his report, he says that overall off-budget activities expand the reach of government, are bad for transparency, add new risks to government balance sheets, and ultimately can result in lower productivity and living standards. Off-budget spending contributes to higher debt and interest payments, potentially leading to higher taxes, which can reduce productivity and living standards. It also may exacerbate inflation. He writes that much of the off-budget spending in recent years has been concerning and that it will become more common as, quote, a way for politicians to appear to be responding to society's challenges while minimising the direct budget impact, even though they bring significant risks onto the balance sheet. The report's conclusion says that taxpayers suffer through underperforming investments of taxpayer funds. It is bad for accountability and transparency and makes the RBA's monetary policy task of controlling inflation more difficult. In other words, this off-budget spending, this almost secret or hidden spending, if you like, under the guise of investment, makes it harder for you to get an interest rate cut, all while the Treasurer brags about how good his budget numbers are.
The Albanese Labor government has delivered a second consecutive budget surplus.
We found savings in the budget. We delivered a second surplus. The big improvement is from less spending. We have turned two big Liberal deficits into two big Labor surpluses. Bigger surplus.
Delivering back-to-back budget surpluses for the first time in nearly 2 decades.
It's easy to appear a good economic manager when you're pulling fiscal sleights of hand, and that's effectively what the Albanese government has mastered. I mean, they push spending off budget to hide from you what the books actually look like. They quote unquote reduce your power bill and the inflation numbers in the process by giving your money that you pay in taxes to your power company to essentially write it off the bill. No change in cost, but it is a change in the numbers on the piece of paper.